after the anti-bribery treaty was signed.
In praktisch allen Bereichen der Siemens AG Zahlung von Provisionen oder Bestechungsgelder zu bezahlen üblich war.
Reinhard Sikacek was in charge of part of Siemens' massive billion-dollar international bribery operations.
Also mit Sicherheit war ich auch ein echter Siemensianer. Der sogenannte Hüter der schwarzen Kassen bezeichnet wurde. Es war uns allen klar, dass es ungesetzlich ist.
To avoid getting caught, Siemens used secret bank accounts in places like Switzerland and front companies, plus the age-old method, cash.
Für eine Million Euro bei uns keinen ganz großen Kopf, weil die Scheine halt sehr groß sind im Gegensatz zu Dollars. 200.000 Euro nicht sogar in einer Manteltasche mitnehmen könnte.
And what Siemens was doing was apparently not unique.
Companies like BAE, it seems, didn't say, we better stop doing it. They said, we better find a safer way of doing it so we don't get into trouble.
British investigative journalist David Lee reported that at BAE headquarters outside of London, the company had packed up documents.
And BAE reacts by moving these operations to Switzerland.
That's how they react. They move everything to Switzerland, yes.
It's 6 o'clock on Thursday the 14th.
New tougher laws come into effect today, banning UK nationals from bribing foreign officials.
After Britain signed that anti-bribery treaty, they enacted a new law.
For economic cooperation and development.
The change in the law drove Peter Gardner out of the shadows.
Our lawyers told us, you cannot continue providing the services that you've been providing. You cannot do it. It would be illegal. You have to stop.
And did BAE say, we also can't do business this way anymore? We'll have to figure out something else?
They were well aware that things had to change.
They knew they had a problem.
Yes, this was mentioned on several occasions as a very substantial problem.
Part of their problem was that reporter, David Lee of The Guardian, who had been investigating BAE.
Well, you know, people call you up. The phone rings. They say, I know something about this story you were writing about. You try and evaluate the person, don't you? You see whether they're genuine, try and understand what their motives are.
Peter Gardner became a confidential source for Lee.
Why did you decide to come forward?
Well, at some stage, the authorities, the Serious Fraud Office or the police or whatever, was going to come knocking on my door. And that meant I would lose total control over the circumstances and how to handle it.
When it started, he was a scared person. He didn't want his name to come out, but he did have these documents.
This is just an example, fairly typical.
Peter Gardner had thousands of documents that backed up his story.
The documents surprised me for two reasons. One, what they showed was astonishing amounts of money being thrown around in what appeared to be ludicrously extravagant ways. The other thing was that it's very rare to get documents about this kind of thing.
Gardner showed Lee the receipts for millions of dollars in expenditures, and then these very simple invoices that the company had him submit each month.
By the time the invoices went to BAE, they didn't tell the truth. They didn't say, you know, purchase of Rolls-Royce for Saudis or payment of flat for girlfriend for official in the Saudi Air Force. They were just one sheet of paper providing support and accommodation services. November, $100,000.
The mountain of invoices would show that BAE paid a total of 60 million pounds, around $100 million.
The whole company is a cutout. It was obviously corrupt and corrupting.
And so David Lee began to write front-page stories.
Lifestyles of the rich and famous was basically the theme. BAE made very little response, and we were surprised because normally these global companies, they're pretty litigious, they're pretty aggressive. They would say, we deny all wrongdoing.
Which is exactly what BAE's then chairman, Sir Richard Evans, said when he was asked about these charges while testifying to the British Parliament.
I think that, you know, business practices have been changed over a period of time. I mean, I can certainly assure you, I mean, that we, and I believe most companies, are not in the business of making payments, passing, as you suggest, I mean, large sums of money to employees of government. I mean, it is just not the way business is done.
and they'd refuse to say anything else. The reason why BAE never said anything to us, we thought we were clever. We had exposed this slush fund. They were obviously sitting there thinking, well, thank goodness they don't know the real story, because all we had was a tiny little corner of what in the end proved to be an enormous worldwide network of secret cash payments amounting to literally billions of dollars that had gone on for years with the connivance of the British government.
In the United Kingdom, the agency that investigates white-collar crime like bribery is called the Serious Fraud Office, the SFO. And that's where David Lee and Peter Gardner went next. The director of the SFO was Robert Wardle.
Sort of unusual that a journalist comes in to talk to a prosecutor about what evidence.
Well, he had his story at that stage, and he printed it. And having discussed it with him and seen what evidence he had, I took the view that there was sufficient to justify a suspicion that an offence may have taken place. And we began the process of requiring the company to provide us with information and documents.
And the investigation began to grow, and it was proceeding reasonably smoothly, although it was a very difficult one.
Prosecutor Helen Garlick supervised what would become the first investigation in the United Kingdom of overseas bribery.
The allegation was improper expenses that appeared to have been paid by British Aerospace through the medium of this small company run by Peter Gardner.
As the prosecutors dug through thousands of BAE documents and bank records, they confirmed Peter Gardner's story. And that wasn't all.
How would you describe the original allegations, the Gardner services, to what you found in the end?
They were a drop in the ocean. I think that would be a fair way of describing them.
Over 60 million pounds, over $100 million was a drop in the ocean.
Yes, relative to the, the amounts of money that we were dealing with here.
So we were talking about billions of dollars.
Yes.
In the mass of documents and accounts, Helen Garlick's team made another startling discovery. Some of the money from the Al Yamama account, around $2 billion, had been sent to Washington, D.C., into the Saudi Ministry of Defense bank accounts controlled by the man who is credited with making the Al Yamama deal, Prince Bandar bin Sultan.